We're too busy for you, Dad. I'm Kane Wilson, 71 years old, and those words changed everything. 6 hours after major surgery, lying in that hospital bed, my son Rick told me he couldn't pick me up. Too busy celebrating his restaurant success. Too important to waste 15 minutes on his old man. Call an Uber, he said. Stop being so needy. Needy. After 5 years of writing checks that built his empire. Here's what Rick didn't know that night. I didn't just help fund his restaurants. I own them. 60%. Every location, every license, every piece of equipment. All documented, all legal, all mine. So while Rick stood in front of 200 guests bragging about his self-made success, I made one phone call. By midnight, his empire was gone. His celebration became his nightmare. And he learned exactly who was really too busy for whom. If you're watching this, hit subscribe. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. But first, let me tell you how we got here. The surgery was scheduled for 7 a.m. on a Monday. Gallbladder removal. Nothing dramatic, but at my age, you don't bounce back like you used to. I'd been in that hospital bed since 6 the night before, going through pre-op procedures, answering the same questions 12 times. Rick knew about the surgery for 3 weeks. I'd called him the day I got the date from Dr. Moore. Dad, of course, will be there, he'd said. Don't worry about anything. Jennifer, my daughter-in-law, had even posted on Instagram about it. Prayers for Grandpa Kane's surgery, Kane Oro, with one of those hands-folded emojis. 43 likes. I counted. But when I woke up in recovery at 11:30 a.m., my phone was silent. The discharge nurse, Patricia, kept asking if my ride was coming. Your son's on his way, right? I called Rick's cell, straight to voicemail, called the restaurant. He's in meetings all day, the hostess said. I could hear him laughing in the background. By 2 p.m., I was sitting in that hospital room in yesterday's clothes, watching other families pick up their loved ones. That's when I called Rick directly on the restaurant's main line. Wilson's Family Kitchen, this is Rick. Son, I'm ready to be discharged. The nurse said, Dad, look, I'm swamped here. We've got the grand reopening celebration tonight. This is huge for us. I understand, but I just need a 15-minute ride home. Can't you call an Uber? We're expecting 200 people tonight. Food critics, city council members. This could make or break us. Us. That word stuck with me. Rick, I had major surgery 6 hours ago. Dad, you're being dramatic. It's outpatient surgery. And honestly, we talked about this. Jen and I think you've been getting a little too dependent lately. This is good for you, learning to handle things yourself. The line went quiet for a moment. Then I heard Jennifer's voice in the background. Tell him we'll check on him, Kane Oro. We're way too busy tonight. Did you hear that? Rick asked. I heard it. Look, I'll send you $50 for the Uber, okay? This dinner is really important to us. $50 for a 15-minute ride home from surgery. That's when something crystallized for me. I'd been carrying this family financially for 5 years, and they couldn't carry me physically for 15 minutes. The thing is, I'd never told Rick exactly how much I'd invested in his success story. He knew I'd helped with the startup costs. What he didn't know was that I'd structured it as a business partnership, not a gift. Wilson Holdings, LLC. 60% ownership. My attorney, Harold Stevens, had insisted on the paperwork, even when I'd protested that I trusted my own son. Trust but verify, Harold had said, especially with family money. $850,000 initial investment. $12,000 monthly consulting fees, which Rick thought was just me being generous with my retirement savings. Equipment leases co-signed. Commercial property guarantees. Liquor licenses that required my signature because of my clean business record. All of it documented. All of it legal. All of it sitting in Harold's office filing cabinet. Rick had built an empire, all right. He just didn't know who owned it. Dad, you still there? I'm here. So we're good? You'll get home fine? I looked out that hospital window at the parking lot. Families helping their loved ones into cars, wheelchairs being folded into trunks, normal people doing normal things for people they cared about. We're good, Rick. Great. Love you, Dad. The line went dead. And that's when I realized that sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes you need respect. And sometimes respect has to be taught. Sitting in that hospital room, I started doing math in my head. Not the kind of math you want to do about your own family, but the kind that keeps you honest about what's really happening. $850,000 in 2019. That was the initial investment to get Wilson's Family Kitchen off the ground. Rick had come to me with big dreams and empty pockets. Dad, I've got the perfect location, the perfect concept. I just need backing.
I'd liquidated 2 of my retirement accounts to make it happen. At 66, that's not money you get back easily. Then came the monthly payments. $12,000 every month for 5 years. Just until we get profitable, Dad. It's a loan. Except we'd never signed loan papers. Harold had structured it as consulting fees to a silent partner. Me. The math was simple. $850,000 plus $12,000 times 60 months. $1,570,000. From my life savings into Rick's self-made success story.
But it wasn't just the money that bothered me as I sat there. It was the pattern. Last Christmas, Rick and Jennifer had posted family photos on social media. Blessed to spend the holidays in our beautiful home. The beautiful home with the mortgage I'd co-signed when Rick's credit wasn't quite good enough. 3 weeks ago, Rick had posted pictures of his new Bentley Continental GT. Hard work pays off, he'd captioned it. I'd co-signed that loan too, $240,000 for a car he drove to the restaurant I owned 60% of. Jennifer's Instagram was full of pictures from their anniversary trip to Tuscany. Celebrating 5 amazing years. What she hadn't mentioned was that their successful business had paid for the trip through Rick's salary, a salary that came from profits generated by my investment. The restaurant business is tough. I knew that going in. Most fail within 2 years. But Wilson's Family Kitchen had succeeded because it had something most restaurants don't have, a silent partner with deep pockets and no ego about taking credit. I'd let Rick be the face of the business. Hell, I'd encouraged it. You're the chef. You're the personality, I'd told him. I'm just the money guy. But sitting in that hospital bed, I realized that somewhere along the way Rick had started believing his own publicity. He genuinely thought he'd built this empire himself. He'd forgotten that every success, every expansion, every piece of equipment had my signature on the financing papers. And now I was too dependent. I was being dramatic about major surgery. I needed to handle things myself. The irony was stunning. If I stayed quiet, if I just accepted this new reality where I was the needy old father who should be grateful for their busy schedules, what would happen? Rick would keep building his reputation as a self-made success. Jennifer would keep posting about their blessed life. And I'd keep signing checks and guarantees whenever they needed financial backing for the next expansion. But I'd lost something more important than money. I'd lost my son's respect. And without respect, what did I have? The privilege of funding their lifestyle while they mocked my legitimate needs? Dr. Moore knocked on the door. Mr. Wilson, we really need to discharge you soon. Rooms needed for the next patient. I understand. I'll be out of here in 5 minutes. She handed me the discharge papers. Instructions for recovery. Pain medication. Follow-up appointment scheduled for Friday. You sure your ride is coming? I looked at my phone. Rick had sent the $50 through Venmo. The memo line read, For Uber home. Thanks for understanding. Thanks for understanding. My ride's coming, I told Dr. Moore. And I meant it. But first I needed to make that phone call. I scrolled through my contacts until I found Harold Stevens. 25 years of business together. He'd handled the sale of my hardware stores, my wife's estate planning, and the incorporation of Wilson Holdings, LLC. More importantly, he'd always answered when I called. Kane? How'd the surgery go? It went fine, Harold. I'm sitting in the hospital right now, waiting to be discharged. Need me to pick you up? That question hit me harder than it should have. A 70-year-old business attorney was willing to drive across town to help me, but my own son couldn't spare 15 minutes. No, I'm okay. But I need you to do something for me. What's that? Pull the Wilson Holdings LLC file, all of it. Kane, what's going on? I told him about the phone call, about Rick's dismissal, about the grand reopening celebration that was more important than my surgery recovery. Harold was quiet for a long moment. Then, you want me to remind your son who actually owns Wilson's Family Kitchen? I want you to be at their grand reopening celebration tonight, with the paperwork. Kane, are you sure about this? Family business can get messy. Harold, my family already is messy. I'm just cleaning it up. Where's this celebration happening? The downtown location, 8 p.m., 200 guests, he said. Food critics, city council members. Public venue, witnesses. Your son making speeches about his success story? That's my guess. Jesus, Kane. This is going to be nuclear. No, Harold. Nuclear would be calling the bank and canceling the equipment leases. This is just education. We hung up, and I immediately called Rick back. This time I wanted everything on record. Wilson's Family Kitchen. This is Rick. Son, it's me again. Dad, I told you I'm busy. Did you get the Uber money? I got it, but I wanted to ask you something about tonight. What about tonight?
This grand reopening celebration? You said it could make or break you? Yeah, it's huge. Why? I was thinking I might stop by, support the family business. The pause was longer than it should have been. Dad, honestly, this is a pretty exclusive event. Invitation only. It's really more of a networking thing. Networking. Right. Business people, industry contacts. You wouldn't really know anyone there. I see. And you don't think I belong at a networking event for the family business? Dad, you're not really part of the business side of things. You're more like an investor. An investor. After 5 years of monthly payments and co-signed loans and personal guarantees. Rick, what exactly do you think my role is in Wilson's family kitchen? You helped us get started. We're grateful for that. But Jen and I are the ones who built this thing. We're the ones putting in 80-hour weeks. We're the ones taking the risks.
With my money. On loans I'd guaranteed. In a business I legally owned 60% of. What risks are those exactly? Dad, come on. You wouldn't understand. You've never run a restaurant. This is life or death every single day. One bad review could tank us. One slow month could close us down. And if you did close down, who would lose money? We all would. But Jen and I would lose everything. Our reputations, our careers. You'd just lose some investment money. Some investment money. $1.5 million was some investment money. Rick, do you know how much I've invested in Wilson's family kitchen? I don't know. A lot. And like I said, we're grateful. $850,000 initial investment. $12,000 a month for 5 years. That's $1,570,000. Silence. Plus equipment lease guarantees, property co-signs, liquor license backing. More silence. Dad, where are you going with this? I'm going to tonight's celebration, Rick, as an investor, to network. Dad, I really don't think... What I think, son, is that you've forgotten something important. Who your partners are. Partners? Check your incorporation papers, Rick. Wilson Holdings, LLC. Read the ownership percentages. Dad, what are you talking about? I'm talking about respect, Rick, and tonight you're going to learn what that word means. I hung up before he could respond. My phone rang immediately. Rick calling back. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. Voicemail again. 4 calls in 2 minutes. The 5th call, I answered. Dad, what did you mean about ownership percentages? You'll find out tonight, son. Dad, you're scaring me. I'm not trying to scare you, Rick. I'm trying to teach you something your mother and I apparently failed to teach you growing up. What's that? How to treat people who love you. This time I turned off the phone. 20 minutes later, I was in an Uber heading home. The driver, a kid probably Rick's age, kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror. You okay back there, sir? You look like you've been through something. Surgery this morning. Oh man, that's rough. Family picking you up? I almost laughed. Something like that. When I got home, I went straight to my home office. 5 years of Wilson Holdings LLC documentation was filed in the bot-cane drawer of my desk. Harold always gave me copies of everything. Business partnerships change, he'd said. Paper doesn't. The original incorporation documents were on top. Wilson Holdings LLC, established October 15, 2019. Members, Thomas Wilson, 60%. Richard Wilson, 40%. Initial capital contribution, $850,000. Thomas Wilson. I'd forgotten how detailed Harold had been. Monthly operating agreements, profit distribution schedules, management responsibilities. Everything clearly defined, legally binding, notarized. Rick had signed every page. I remembered him joking about it at the time. Dad, this is overkill. We're family. We trust each other. Just covering our bases, I'd said. Now I was grateful for Harold's paranoia. I spread the documents across my desk and took pictures with my phone. The bank statements came next. Every $12,000 transfer clearly labeled as WH LLC consulting payment. 60 payments over 5 years. All to Richard Wilson, all documented. Then I found the folder I'd hoped I wouldn't need. The equipment leases. Every piece of kitchen equipment in all 3 restaurants was leased under my personal guarantee. If Rick defaulted, I was responsible. If he missed payments, they came after me. If he decided to close Cane Oro, I was still liable for the remaining lease terms. Commercial property agreements. 3 restaurant locations, all requiring personal guarantees for the leases. My signature on everyone. Liquor licenses. In Ohio, you need a clean business record to hold liquor licenses. Rick had a bankruptcy from his 20s. Nothing serious, but enough to complicate licensing. So the licenses were in my name, with Rick listed as manager. Insurance policies, business liability, property insurance, workers' compensation, all requiring personal guarantees, all with my signature. I'd built a house of cards, and Rick was living in it without realizing who owned the foundation. My phone buzzed. A text from Rick. Dad, I found the incorporation papers. We need to talk. I typed back. We'll talk tonight, at your celebration. Dad, I didn't know about the 60/40th split. I thought you were just an investor. You signed the papers, Rick. I didn't read them. Harold said it was standard. It is standard. For business partnerships. Dad, please, can we work this out before tonight? This celebration is really important to us. I stared at that text for a long time. Part of me wanted to fix this quietly. Part of me still wanted to be the generous father who solved his son's problems behind the scenes. But then I remembered sitting in that hospital room. Can't you call an Uber? We're way too busy tonight. I typed back, see you tonight, son. An hour later, my doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see Rick's Bentley in my driveway, the Bentley I'd co-signed for. He was pacing on my front porch, phone pressed to his ear. I opened the door. Dad, thank God, we need to fix this. Come in. Rick followed me to the living room. He looked rattled, hair disheveled, tie loosened. This was not the confident restaurateur from this morning. Dad, I called Harold Stevens. He won't take my calls. Harold works for me, Rick, not you. Dad, I need to understand what's happening here. Are you really a 60% owner of my restaurants? Our restaurants, and yes. But I run them. I manage them. I make all the decisions. You manage them, Rick. I own them. There's a difference. Dad, this is crazy. I've spent 5 years building this business. With my money. Your investment. There's a difference. I pulled out the incorporation papers and set them on the coffee table. According to these papers, there's no difference at all. We're partners. 60/40 split on everything. Profits, losses, decisions, ownership. Rick picked up the papers and read them for what was probably the first time in 5 years. Jesus, Dad, why didn't you tell me? I thought you knew. You signed them. I trusted you. I thought this was just paperwork. Legal formalities. It was legal formalities, Rick, for a business partnership. But you never acted like a partner. You never came to meetings, never questioned my decisions. I was a silent partner, the emphasis being on silent. Rick sat down heavily on my couch. Dad, what do you want? What I want, Rick, is simple. I want respect from my own family. I want to be treated like someone who matters. You do matter. This morning, when I needed help, I didn't matter. Tonight, when I wanted to support your celebration, I didn't belong. Dad, we can fix this. Yes, I said. We can. Tonight. By 7:30 p.m., I was dressed in my best suit and sitting in my car outside Wilson's family kitchen downtown. The valet line stretched around the block. Local news cameras were setting up on the sidewalk. This was bigger than I'd expected. I watched Rick and Jennifer arrive in the Bentley, posing for photographers. Jennifer wore a dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Rick had on a Cuscane Italian suit I'd never seen before. They looked like celebrities at a movie premiere. The local Business Journal reporter approached them with a microphone. I rolled down my window to listen. Rick Wilson, congratulations on 5 years of success. What's the secret to building a restaurant empire from nothing? Hard work, Rick said, flashing that confident smile. And believing in yourself when nobody else will. Nobody else. That stung. Any advice for other young entrepreneurs starting from scratch? Don't wait for handouts, Jennifer chimed in. We bootstrapped this entire operation. Started with nothing but determination and a dream. Bootstrapped, with my $1.5 million. What's next for Wilson's Family Kitchen? Expansion, Rick said. We're looking at 2 more locations this year. When you build something from the ground up like we have, growth becomes inevitable. From the ground up. I'd heard enough. I parked across the street and walked toward the restaurant. The valet didn't recognize me, which wasn't surprising. I'd never been to any of Rick's business events. Silent partner, remember? Inside, the celebration was in full swing. 200 people, just like Rick had said. City council members wearing name tags. Food critics with notebooks. Local business owners I recognized from the newspaper's Power 50 Inches list. Rick stood at the center of it all, holding court like a king. He was telling a story about the early days, about maxing out credit cards and eating ramen for months to make the restaurant work. The crowd was eating it up. The first year was brutal, he was saying. Revenue was inconsistent. We didn't know if we'd make it, but we kept pushing because we knew we were building something special. We, always we, never acknowledging who'd made that first year possible. Jennifer was working the room like a professional networker. I heard her telling someone from the Chamber of Commerce about their self-funded expansion strategy and their organic growth model. Self-funded. Organic growth. The words made my skeniac turn. I found a corner table and ordered a drink. The bartender was new. I didn't recognize him from my previous visits. Not that I'd visited often. Silent partners don't usually hang around their investments. 20 minutes later, Rick took the microphone for his big speech. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for celebrating with us tonight. 5 years ago, Jennifer and I had a crazy dream. We wanted to create something special in this community, a place where families could gather, where food brought people together, where success was built on honest work and determination. Applause filled the room. People said we were crazy, 2 kids with no money trying to break into the restaurant business. But we had something more valuable than money. We had vision, we had commitment, and we had each other. More applause, louder this time. Tonight, I'm proud to say that Wilson's Family Kitchen has exceeded every goal we set. 3 locations, 67 employees, over $2 million in annual revenue, and we did it our way, with our sweat, with our sacrifice. The crowd was on their feet now. Rick was beaming, soaking up the adulation. But this is just the beginning. Next year, we're opening 2 more locations. We're launching a catering division. We're building something that will last for generations. Jennifer joined him at the microphone. We're proof that the American dream is still alive, that hard work and determination can overcome any obstacle, that success is possible when you believe in yourself and never give up. The applause was thunderous. Camera flashes were going off. The local news crew was filming everything. And that's when I saw Harold Stevens enter through the front door. He was carrying a leather briefcase and wearing the same serious expression he'd worn when he'd handled my wife's estate. Harold didn't do social events. When Harold Stevens showed up somewhere, it was business. Rick saw him too. Even from across the room, I could see my son's face change. The confident smile wavered. He said something to Jennifer, then stepped away from the microphone. Harold walked straight to my table. "Kane, how are you feeling?" "Better every minute." "You sure you want to do this? Once I open this briefcase, there's no going back." I looked around the room. All these successful people celebrating Rick's self-made success. All these business leaders who would remember this night as the moment they learned the truth about Wilson's Family Kitchen. "Harold, my son spent this morning telling me I was too dependent, too dramatic, too needy. He told 200 people tonight that he built this empire with no help from anyone. And you want to correct the record? I want to teach him about gratitude and honesty and what happens when you forget where your success really came from." Harold nodded and opened his briefcase. "These are the original incorporation documents. These are the bank records showing every monthly payment. These are the equipment leases, property guarantees, and liquor license applications, all with your signature, all showing your legal ownership stake. And if Rick tries to deny it, Kane, he can't deny notarized documents. This isn't a family argument anymore. This is contract law." I stood up and straightened my tie. "Then let's go educate my son about contract law." Harold smiled. "Kane, I've been your attorney for 25 years. This is going to be the most interesting billable hour of my career." We walked toward the front of the restaurant where Rick was still basking in applause. The crowd hadn't noticed us yet. Rick hadn't seen Harold's briefcase, but that was about to change. Harold and I approached the microphone area just as Rick was wrapping up his speech. The crowd was still energized, still applauding. Rick looked like a man on top of the world. "Ladies and gentlemen," Rick continued, "thank you again for celebrating with us. This is truly a dream come true." That's when Harold stepped forward. "Excuse me, Rick. Sorry to interrupt, but I need a moment of your time." The room went quiet. 200 people suddenly focused on the elderly attorney with the briefcase. Rick's smile froze. "Harold? What are you doing here?" "I'm here on business, Rick. There's been some confusion about tonight's celebration, and I think it's important we clear it up." Jennifer appeared at Rick's side. "Confusion about what?" Harold opened his briefcase and pulled out a manila folder. about who actually owns Wilson's family kitchen. The silence in the room was complete now. You could hear the air conditioning humming. Rick's face went pale. Harold, maybe we should discuss this privately. Oh, but Rick, this is a public celebration of your success story. I think the public deserves to know the true story. Harold pulled out the incorporation documents. Ladies and gentlemen, these are the founding documents of Wilson Holdings LLC, the parent company that owns all Wilson's family kitchen locations. He held up the papers so the crowd could see them. According to these legally binding notarized documents, Wilson Holdings LLC is owned 60% by Thomas Wilson, Rick's father, and 40% by Richard Wilson. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Camera phones started coming out. Rick tried to grab the microphone. Harold, this is not the time or place. When is the time, Rick? Harold continued. When you're giving interviews about building this business from nothing, when you're telling investors about your self-funded growth strategy, when you're accepting awards for Young Entrepreneur of the Year? The crowd was pressing closer now. The local news crew had their cameras rolling. Harold pulled out another document. These are bank records showing monthly payments of $12,000 from Thomas Wilson to Richard Wilson over the past 5 years. Payments labeled as consulting fees to a business partner. Jennifer snatched at the papers. Those are private financial records. Actually, Jennifer, these are business records. Public information for an LLC. And since Mr. Wilson is the majority owner, he has every right to share them. Harold turned to address the crowd directly. Over the past 5 years, Thomas Wilson has invested $1,570,000 in Wilson's family kitchen. He has personally guaranteed every equipment lease, co-signed every property agreement, and holds all the liquor licenses in his name due to his pristine business record. The murmuring was getting louder. People were looking at each other, then at Rick, then at me. Furthermore, Harold continued, as the majority shareholder in Wilson Holdings LLC, Thomas Wilson has the legal authority to make all major business decisions for Wilson's family kitchen. That's when Margaret Chen, the general manager, stepped forward from the crowd. Wait a minute, she said. Mr. Wilson is here tonight? All eyes turned to me. I raised my hand slightly. Margaret walked over to me. Mr. Wilson, I've been trying to reach you for weeks about the new equipment orders. Rick said you were unavailable. I've been available, Margaret. Rick just didn't want to involve me in business decisions. Margaret looked confused. But you're the primary owner. Nothing gets approved without your signature. The crowd was buzzing now. Conversations breaking out everywhere. The news crew was filming everything. Rick grabbed the microphone. Everyone, please, this is a family matter. There's been some misunderstanding about... No misunderstanding, son. I walked to the front of the crowd. Harold, may I see those documents? Harold handed me the incorporation papers. I held them up for everyone to see. My name is Thomas Wilson. I'm 71 years old. This morning, I had gallbladder surgery. This afternoon, my son told me he was too busy to pick me up from the hospital because he had dinner plans. The room was dead silent now. These dinner plans, I gestured around the room. This celebration of his self-made success story. I unfolded the incorporation documents. According to these papers, which my son signed 5 years ago, I own 60% of every Wilson's family kitchen location. I've invested over $1.5 million in this business. I've personally guaranteed every loan, every lease, every major financial obligation. Someone in the crowd said, "Holy shit." Others shushed them. This morning, Rick told me I was being too dependent, too dramatic, that I needed to learn to handle things myself. I looked directly at my son. He told me I wouldn't fit in at tonight's networking event because I wasn't really part of the business side of things. Rick tried to speak, but no words came out. He told me he was a self-made success, that he'd built this empire from nothing, that he'd taken all the risks. I held up the bank statements. These are the risks I took. 60 monthly payments of $12,000, equipment leases totaling $800,000, property guarantees worth $2.3 million. The crowd was completely captivated now. This was better than any dinner theater they'd ever attended. Tonight, Rick gave a beautiful speech about building something with no help from anyone, about bootstrapping this operation, about proving that hard work and determination are all you need to succeed. I looked around the room at all the successful business people, all the city council members, all the reporters. I want to be clear about something. Rick is an excellent chef. He's a talented manager. He's built a wonderful restaurant operation, but he didn't build it from nothing. He didn't bootstrap it. And he certainly didn't do it alone. Jennifer finally found her voice. Kane, this is humiliating. Can't we discuss this privately? Jennifer, I tried to discuss things privately. This morning, when I called from my hospital bed asking for a 15-minute ride home. That seemed like a good time for a private family conversation. I turned back to the crowd. My son told me this celebration could make or break his business. He was right, just not in the way he expected. Harold stepped forward again. Ladies and gentlemen, I have additional documents here if anyone would like to verify the information. Partnership agreements, loan documents, licensing paperwork. Everything is properly notarized and legally binding. The food critic from the city paper raised her hand. Mr. Wilson, are you planning to make changes to the restaurant operations? I smiled. That's an excellent question. As the majority owner of Wilson Holdings, LLC, I have some decisions to make about the future direction of this business. Rick finally found his voice. Dad, please, don't do this. Do what, Rick? Exercise my legal rights as a business owner? Make decisions about my investment? Set boundaries about how I expect to be treated? The room was electric with tension. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. I turned to Harold. Harold, what's the legal process for a majority shareholder to make operational changes? Well, Kane, according to the operating agreement, you can make any changes you deem necessary with 48 hours written notice to the minority partner. 48 hours, that seems reasonable. I looked at Rick and Jennifer. Their faces were white as sheets. Rick, Jennifer, I'll be in touch tomorrow morning. We have some business to discuss. The crowd stayed dead silent as I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Harold's contact information. Harold, I'd like to exercise my rights as majority shareholder of Wilson Holdings, LLC, effective immediately. Harold opened his briefcase again and pulled out a fresh document. Kane, I took the liberty of preparing some paperwork, just in case. Rick stepped forward desperately. Dad, wait, let's talk about this. Please. We did talk, Rick, this morning, when you told me to call an Uber. Harold handed me a pen and a document titled Notice of Operational Changes, Wilson Holdings, LLC. Ladies and gentlemen, I announced to the crowd, as majority owner of Wilson Holdings, LLC, I'm implementing some immediate changes to our business operations. The news cameras were rolling. The food critics were taking notes. The city council members were watching with their mouths open. I signed the first document. Effective at midnight tonight, all Wilson's Family Kitchen locations will temporarily cease operations pending a complete management review. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Jennifer grabbed Rick's arm. Dad, you can't do this. We have 67 employees. We have reservations booked for months. Rick, I'm the majority owner. I can absolutely do this. Harold handed me another document. This is a notice to all equipment leasing companies. As the personal guarantor on all leases, Thomas Wilson is exercising his right to review all agreements before authorizing continued operations. I signed that one too. Margaret Chen stepped forward. Mr. Wilson, what should I tell the staff? Tell them they'll receive full pay during the review period. Tell them this is a business decision, not a reflection of their work. And tell them we'll have answers within 48 hours. Rick was shaking now. Dad, this will destroy everything we've built. Rick, this will destroy everything I've built, everything you've managed. The crowd was buzzing with conversation. People were pulling out phones, probably texting friends about the drama they were witnessing. Harold handed me a third document. This is a notification to your business insurance company. All policies require notification of operational changes within 24 hours. I signed it without hesitation. Furthermore, I continued, addressing the crowd, effective tomorrow morning, all business bank accounts for Wilson Holdings, LLC will require dual authorization for any transactions over $100. As majority owner, I'll be implementing new financial oversight procedures. The local news reporter stepped forward with her microphone. Mr. Wilson, are you shutting down the restaurants permanently? That depends entirely on whether my business partner is willing to renegotiate our working relationship. Rick looked like he was about to be sick. Dad, you're destroying 5 years of work. No, Rick, I'm protecting 5 years of investment. There's a difference. Jennifer was frantically typing on her phone, probably trying to figure out if there was any legal way to stop this. Harold pulled out one final document. Kane, this is the big one. Notification to the Ohio Department of Commerce regarding liquor license ownership changes. I held the document up so the crowd could see it. Since all liquor licenses for Wilson's Family Kitchen are in my name, I have the authority to suspend them pending review. That's when Rick completely lost it. Dad, you can't take away our liquor licenses. That's 30% of our revenue. Our revenue, Rick, and I'm not taking them away. I'm reviewing them, like any responsible business owner should. The crowd was completely riveted now. This was better than reality television. I signed the liquor license notification and handed it back to Harold. Harold, how long does the Department of Commerce need to process this paperwork? For a voluntary suspension pending review? They can process it overnight. The licenses could be suspended by Kane Oro afternoon. Rick turned to the crowd desperately. Everyone, please. This is a family disagreement. It doesn't reflect on the quality of our restaurants or our commitment to this community. Actually, Rick, I said, this reflects exactly on our commitment to this community. I'm committed to running an honest business with honest leadership. I turned to address the crowd directly. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for disrupting your evening, but sometimes truth is more important than celebration. The food critic raised her hand again. Mr. Wilson, what would it take for you to reverse these decisions? I looked at Rick and Jennifer. They were both staring at me with expressions of pure panic. That's between me and my business partner. But I will say this. Respect is not negotiable. Honesty is not optional. And family loyalty works both ways. Harold closed his briefcase with a definitive snap. Kane, all the paperwork is filed. The 48-hour clock starts now. I looked around the room one more time. 200 people who had come to celebrate Rick's self-made success story. 200 witnesses to the truth about who really built Wilson's family kitchen. Rick, Jennifer, I'll be in touch Kane Oro morning. We have a lot to discuss. I turned to leave, then stopped. Oh, and Rick, next time I call you from a hospital bed, you might want to answer. Harold and I walked toward the exit. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Nobody said a word until we reached the door. Then the room exploded into conversation behind us. Outside, Harold and I stood on the sidewalk as valet drivers scrambled to bring cars around for the early departures. Kane, that was either the most brilliant power move I've ever witnessed or the most expensive family therapy session in history. Harold, how long do I have before Rick tries to challenge this legally? He can't challenge it. Everything we did tonight is perfectly legal. You're the majority owner. Everything was properly documented, and all notifications were filed correctly. And if he wants to fix this, he calls you Kane Oro morning and apologizes. Then you two negotiate new terms for your business relationship. And if he doesn't? Harold shrugged. Then you own 3 empty restaurants and he learns a very expensive lesson about respect. We got into Harold's car and drove away, leaving Rick and Jennifer to explain to 200 people how their self-made empire had just been revealed as someone else's investment. My phone was already buzzing with calls from Rick. I turned it off. Some lessons are best learned in silence. By 10 a.m. the next morning, my phone had 73 missed calls. 68 from Rick, 5 from Jennifer. The voicemail box was full. I made coffee and sat down to read the morning news online. The Business Journal had already posted a story. Local restaurant empire revealed as family investment dispute. The headline was accompanied by a photo from last night showing me signing Harold's documents while Rick looked on in horror. The article was fair but devastating. What appeared to be a celebration of entrepreneurial success became a lesson in business partnership documentation when the true ownership structure of Wilson's family kitchen was revealed during a public event. They'd quoted several attendees. The food critic had written, "The evening took an unexpected turn when the supposed self-made restaurateur's father produced legal documents showing majority ownership of the business." My doorbell rang at 10:15. Through the window, I could see Rick's Bentley in the driveway again. This time, he wasn't pacing. He was sitting on my front steps with his head in his hands. I opened the door. "Dad." "Rick, can I come in? It's your choice." He followed me to the kitchen. He looked like he hadn't slept. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair was a mess, and his eyes were red. "Dad, you destroyed us last night." "I corrected the record, Rick. There's a difference." The phones haven't stopped ringing. Reporters, creditors, employees, Cuscaneers calling to cancel reservations. I poured myself a cup of coffee. Didn't offer him one. "What did you tell them?" "What could I tell them? That my father owns the business and shut us down because I couldn't give him a ride home from surgery? Is that what you think happened?" Rick sat down heavily at my kitchen table. "Dad, I don't know what to think anymore. I found those incorporation papers last night and read them. Really read them. I never realized..." "What didn't you realize?" "That you actually own most of the business. I thought you were just helping out. I thought the monthly payments were gifts. $12,000 a month for 5 years. You thought that was gift money?" I thought you were proud of me. I thought you wanted to support my success. I sat down across from him. Rick, I was proud of you. I did want to support your success, but somewhere along the way, you started believing your own publicity. What do you mean? You started thinking you built this empire yourself. You started forgetting who made it possible. And yesterday, when I needed you for 15 minutes, you told me I was being too dependent. Rick put his head in his hands. Dad, I'm sorry. I was stressed about the celebration. I said things I didn't mean. You meant them, Rick. The question is whether you still mean them. What do you want me to do? I pulled out my phone and showed him the news article. First, you're going to call every reporter who quoted you in this story. You're going to tell them the truth about how Wilson's family kitchen was really built. Dad, that's humiliating. Rick, lying about it is humiliating. Telling the truth is just honest. What else? You're going to call every employee personally. You're going to explain that the restaurants will reopen but under new management structure. You're going to apologize for the uncertainty. New management structure? I stood up and walked to my home office. Came back with a folder full of documents. Rick, you have two choices. Choice one, we renegotiate our partnership with clear roles, clear expectations, and clear consequences. You acknowledge my ownership stake publicly. You acknowledge my investment publicly. And you treat me with the respect that a business partner and your father deserves. What's choice two? Choice two, I exercise my rights as majority owner to dissolve Wilson Holdings LLC. I liquidate all assets, pay off all debts, and distribute remaining funds according to ownership percentages. You get 40% of whatever's left. Rick went pale. How much would be left? After paying off equipment leases, property obligations, and employee severance? Maybe $300,000. Your share would be $120,000. Dad, that would destroy everything. Rick, I built this business once. I can build another one. The question is whether you want to be part of rebuilding this one. My phone rang. Harold Stevens. Kane, I've got reporters calling my office. They want to know if you're planning to reopen the restaurants. What did you tell them? I told them you're reviewing all options as the majority owner, but I need to know your intentions for the insurance and licensing paperwork. Harold, Rick's here with me. We're discussing the future of the business. Good, because I've got the Department of Commerce on hold. They need to know about the liquor licenses by noon. I looked at Rick. Son, what's it going to be? Rick was quiet for a long moment. Then, Dad, if we renegotiate, what would that look like? You run day-to-day operations. I have input on major decisions, financial transparency on everything, and most importantly, you acknowledge publicly that this business was built through partnership, not self-made success. And personally? Personally, you remember that I'm your father. When I need help, you help. When I call, you answer. When I'm in the hospital, you show up. Rick nodded slowly. And if I agree to this, the restaurants reopen? The restaurants reopen Canioro. Full operations. No interruption to employee paychecks. Business as usual, except with honest marketing. What about last night? What about all the publicity? Rick, last night was a lesson. What you do with that lesson is up to you. He was quiet for another long moment. Dad, I want to fix this. I want to make this right. Then let's call Harold back and tell him to reinstate the licenses. Rick nodded. Okay. But Dad, what? I really am sorry. About the hospital. About treating you like you didn't matter. About forgetting what you've done for us. I looked at my son, still young enough to learn. Still my boy, despite everything. Rick, apologies are a good start. But respect is earned through actions, not words. I understand. Good. Now let's call Harold and get our business back to business. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in the downtown Wilson's family kitchen for the first time as a publicly acknowledged co-owner. The lunch rush was in full swing, the kitchen was humming, and the staff seemed to have settled into the new normal. Margaret Chen approached my table with a cup of coffee. Mr. Wilson, the new supplier contracts are ready for your review. Rick wanted to make sure you approved them before signing. Thank you, Margaret. I'll look at them this afternoon. It was a small thing, but it mattered. Rick was actually consulting me on business decisions now. Not because he had to, but because he understood that partnership means partnership. My phone buzzed. A text from Rick. Dad, the Business Journal wants to do a follow-up interview about family businesses. Interested in doing it together? I typed back, yes, truth is always good for business. The local news had followed the story closely. Rick had done 3 interviews in the past 2 weeks, each time crediting me as his business partner and acknowledging the real story behind Wilson's family kitchen. The headlines had shifted from Restaurant Empire Crumbles to Family Business Finds New Partnership Model. It hadn't been easy for Rick. His social media following had dropped significantly once people learned he wasn't actually a self-made success story. Some of the business community had been critical of his initial misrepresentation, but other people had respected his honesty in correcting the record. More importantly, our relationship had changed. Rick called me twice a week now, not just when he needed something. Jennifer had apologized for her part in last night's dismissal, and she'd actually driven me to my follow-up appointment with Dr. Moore. The restaurant business was doing fine. Better than fine, actually. The publicity had brought in curious cuscaneers, and the food quality had never wavered. Rick really was a talented chef and manager. He just needed to learn the difference between leadership and ownership. My phone rang. Rick calling from the kitchen. "Dad, we just got a cancellation for table 12 tonight. Want to bring a guest for dinner?" On the house. "I'd like that. I'll bring Harold. He deserves a good meal after all the paperwork he's processed lately." "Perfect. 7:30 work? See you then." That evening, Harold and I sat at table 12 while Rick personally prepared our meal. The restaurant was packed with regular cuscaneers who'd returned after the initial drama died down. "Kane, you realize you could have handled this differently," Harold said. "You could have just called Rick privately, shown him the papers, worked it out behind closed doors." "Harold, private conversations weren't working. Rick needed to understand the consequences of his choices. And if he'd called your bluff, if he'd chosen to let you dissolve the business, I thought about that. Then he would have learned a more expensive lesson, but he'd still have learned it." Rick appeared at our table with 2 plates of his signature dish. "Dad, Harold, this is a new recipe I've been working on. I wanted to get your opinions before adding it to the menu." Harold raised an eyebrow. "You're asking your father's opinion on menu choices now?" Rick smiled. "I'm asking my business partner's opinion. There's a difference." After Harold left, Rick and I sat at the bar nursing whiskey and watching the last cuscaneers finish their meals. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Shoot. That night at the hospital, when you made the phone call to Harold, had you already planned all this?" I considered the question. "Rick, I'd planned for the possibility. Harold always told me to keep documentation current, but I never wanted to use it." "What changed your mind?" "When you told me I was being too dependent, when you said I needed to handle things myself. That's when I realized you'd forgotten who was actually handling things." Rick nodded. "I did forget. I got caught up in the success, in the recognition. I started believing my own story. Rick, success is great, recognition is nice, but neither one means anything if you lose sight of what really matters. Family, honesty, gratitude, the basics." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the kitchen staff clean up after another successful night. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "Thanks for not giving up on me." "Rick, I'm your father and your business partner. Giving up was never an option. Teaching you respect, that was always the plan." I finished my whiskey and stood up to leave. "Same time next week?" Wouldn't miss it. And for the first time in 5 years, I knew he meant it. If you've made it this far, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family? Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and demanding respect? Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and remember, sometimes the people we love most need the hardest lessons.